Welcome to Darkwatch Stories, where we bring to life the chills, the shadows, and the mysteries that linger in the dark. If you enjoy spine-tingling stories and want to support the journey into the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Now, sit back, dim the lights, and let's step into tonight's story. My name is Oliver. If anyone ever asked why I chose the fairground life, I wouldn't know how to answer. I had no dreams, no plans, just an old bag and hands used to pulling ropes, tightening bolts, and cleaning the corners regular people never step into. I lived in windy nights, slept in cold metal cars, believing tomorrow would be the same as yesterday. Until that fateful evening in Reno, when I met the man in the red coat. That night, the fairground looked like a graveyard, clawed open by the wind. Tents had fallen, the ground was mud, and power cables lay around like dead snakes. We'd just been stiffed on our pay, and everyone was pissed off. I was dragging a generator crate when I saw him standing by the fence. Red coat, black shoes, posture straight as a mile marker in a storm. Not a speck of mud on him. He looked at me like he'd been waiting a long time. When he crooked his finger, I walked over and my life veered off course from that exact moment. He called himself the Ringmaster. No surname, no first name, just that. "I'm hiring," he said. Voice soft but heavy as a sack of sand. "A traveling circus. Paid in full at the end of each day, no strings attached." Anyone in this line of work is suspicious of the phrase "no strings attached," but his eyes, unnaturally still, made it impossible for me to walk away. I followed him into a rented van, not even getting the chance to say goodbye to anyone. At some point I dozed off. When I opened my eyes, the asphalt road was gone. In front of us lay an empty field, so wide it hurt to look at, but the black and gold tents were already there, tall and perfectly still, as if they'd grown straight up from the earth. No trucks, no tire tracks, not a single human sound. Everything stood there like it had been waiting for years. A chill ran down my spine, but the ringmaster only said, "Get out, Ollie. This is your new home." That first night, he handed me an envelope with my name on it, written in neat handwriting that looked carved into the paper. Inside was cash and a silver pin shaped like a crescent moon. "Put it on," he said, "so the others know you belong here." I didn't ask who the others were, but when he walked past the tents, the workers, old or young, stood still as statues. They didn't bow, they just went quiet. I had never seen anyone be feared in that particular way. I was used to the chaos of fairs, but here there were no shouts, no laughter, no people arguing. Everything ran too smoothly. The older workers looked at me with strange eyes, like they were trying to guess how long I'd last. When night fell, the ringmaster walked through each tent, his fingers gliding lightly along the ropes like he was feeling the pulse of some giant creature. And I swear the canvas trembled under his touch. The audience on the first night was so packed I couldn't understand where they came from. No posters, no speakers blaring announcements, no social media. Yet when the moon rose, groups of well-dressed people came in, cheerful like this was an annual tradition. They didn't buy tickets. There wasn't even a ticket booth. They just walked in. The ringmaster murmured in my ear as he passed, "Everything ends at 6 in the morning. Before that, everything is free." I didn't know why that sentence made my skin crawl. My job that night was simple. Pull light cables, hold props for the magician. clean up when told. But the more I worked, the more I noticed every gaze in the circus followed the ringmaster. No one was really in charge of lights or sound. Everything seemed to adjust itself to his will. When he walked into a tent, the lights changed color to match his steps. When he tilted his head back, the wind shifted direction. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew he wasn't normal. In the first days, I only saw a few odd things. But as I stayed longer, the darker tents began to show their true nature. There were places no one was allowed to enter in the daytime, areas the lights never reached, and at dawn when we tore down the tents to move on, I felt like the circus wasn't being dismantled at all, but withdrawing itself, curling up like an animal going into hibernation. That's when I realized this place wasn't just a job. It was a trap covered in carnival lights. I learned the first rule by accident. One night, while hauling cables behind the freak tent, I heard water, not from a faucet or fish tank. It was heavy, wet, splashing like something big rolling under deep water. I moved closer. Behind the tent, in the dark, there was a water tank as long as a swimming lane, with curved glass as thick as my arm. There were no lights, yet the water glowed faintly, as if lit from within. I didn't know what I was looking at until they surfaced. 4 mermaids, so beautiful my heart stalled. Their skin was so pale it was almost transparent, their long black hair flowing like ink in the water. But it wasn't their beauty that stunned me, it was their eyes. They looked through the glass, through me, as if they'd known me for a very long time. One slid right up to the glass, her hands resting lightly on it. Her fingers were unnaturally long. I thought she was waving hello, until I saw the fine, needle-sharp teeth hiding behind her lips. Every newcomer got hypnotized by that sight. I was no different. Some nights they swam slowly up and down the tank like they were dancing, their silver tails slicing the water into streaks of light so beautiful it hurt to watch. One of them had thin white scars running down her arm, like claw marks. She smiled at me a lot. A small, gentle smile that made you think she was fragile, in need of protection. But once, when I accidentally looked deep into her eyes, I saw a dark, bottomless well, no end, no light. I asked the ringmaster why they didn't perform at night, because clearly they were captivating enough to be the main attraction. He chuckled, a soft laugh sharp as a needle. Oh, they do perform, but only for the special guests who know how to pay the right price. I didn't understand, not until a wealthy man with shiny shoes came in after the show with a thick wad of cash. He followed the ringmaster into the area behind the tank. There was a sharp click as the door locked, then silence. The next morning, I was raking gravel around the tank when I saw something mixed in with the wet moss. A small bone, not a fish bone, a human bone, smooth, white, with a bit of joint still attached. I stepped back, heart racing. One of the rope crew walked by, glanced at the bone, and shrugged like it was nothing. Don't let 'em smile at you too long. They're hungry all night. Then he walked off, leaving me there, shaking, staring into the dark water like I was looking down the throat of some ancient beast. That evening, I just finished adjusting the stage lights when I heard someone call softly behind the freak tent. A young man in an expensive suit stood by the entrance to the restricted area. He smiled at me, smelling faintly of alcohol. Hey, kid, where's the mermaid tank? I'm invited to a private show." I didn't have time to answer before the ringmaster appeared behind him, peeling out of the shadows. "This way," he said gently, placing a hand on the guest's shoulder. My heart sank, and I didn't even know why. I pretended to tidy up nearby, but kept sneaking glances. The ringmaster led him to a small metal door right behind the tank. I'd only seen that door open once before, when they threw in raw meat at dawn. He turned the lock and pushed the guest inside. The young man's face changed completely when he saw what was in there, but he forced himself to keep smiling, lifting his chin in a show of confidence. The door shut with a cold, final click. Then everything went quiet. Not even a minute later, I heard the tank erupt, water tearing apart fast and hard like a predator lunging. Then a scream, cut off, shattered, crushed down as if someone had grabbed his throat and squeezed. I froze. No one in the circus ran over. No one reacted. They all knew exactly what was happening. When I finally forced myself to step up to the edge of the tank, the water had gone darker. Something long and black was dragging itself down to the bottom, disappearing under the swaying algae like a hand waving goodbye. At dawn, when the sun was just smearing a bit of pale gold across the sky, the ringmaster opened the drains on the tank as usual. A cold breath rolled out, heavy as rusted iron. As the water dropped, I saw something that will haunt me for the rest of my life. Silver coins gleaming among shattered bits of bone. The mermaids liked keeping souvenirs from who they ate. The ringmaster had said that once, half joking, but when he bent down to pick up a coin, his eyes sparkled as if he were admiring art. That night, he stood beside me while I was tweaking the light cables. "Oli, don't stare at them for too long," he said in a voice so gentle it was terrifying. "Mermaids don't love. They only hunger." He rested his hand on my shoulder. "But they like you. Be careful." I couldn't tell if that was a warning or some twisted form of amusement, but from that moment on, I always felt watched whenever I passed the tank. Eyes under the water, waiting, hungry, endlessly patient. After the incident at the mermaid tank, I started avoiding dark areas. But the circus wasn't big, there weren't many places to hide. Wandering the maze-like paths between tents, I discovered a small purple tent tucked behind the vet's trailer. No signboard, no string lights, no decoration to lure people in. Just a crescent moon symbol painted in silver on a wooden plank stuck in the ground. When the wind blew, the plank rattled softly, like it was whispering my name. I stepped inside. It was darker than I expected, but not the scary kind of dark. The faint smell of herbal tea and candle wax drifted through the air. There was no stage, no props, just dusty bookshelves and countless glass jars filled with strange liquids. In the center stood a round table, and on it sat a crystal ball the size of a child's head, and inside that crystal ball was a face. A woman's face. Her eyes opened and looked straight at me, as if she'd been waiting for me to walk in. "Hello, Ollie," she said. Her voice low and soft, so familiar it gave me chills. "You finally came." I hadn't even asked how she knew my name when the face in the crystal tilted slightly, as if she was examining every piece of my soul in a single second. Her hair floated gently around her, like it was drifting underwater. Her face was bright, but not cold. "I am Madame Rosmerta," she said. "And if you still want a future, you'll have to listen to me." I sat down on the wobbly wooden chair in front of the table. Madame Rosmerta's face in the crystal ball looked kind, but there was something heavier hiding behind her eyes. "You've gone too deep already," she murmured, "but there's still a way out, if you decide soon." Her voice was so warm I almost believed I was safe there. "Don't let the circus lull you to sleep, Ollie. It gives you money, gives you a sense of belonging, but all of that is bait." My throat tightened. No one in the circus had ever spoken to me like that, honest, direct, with a hint of pity. I asked her why she was helping me. Madame smiled, a sad smile like someone who'd been away from home too long. "Because I know what it's like to be trapped," she said. "I used to own an inn. I trusted the wrong guest. In the end, I was imprisoned in this glass for decades." The candles around the tent flickered. "But you're different, Ollie. You still have legs to run with, a heart that can still choose. Don't let the promises of this circus turn into chains." She looked at me, gentle as ever. "And remember, rule 2. Talk to me whenever you can. I'm the last safe place left here." In the days that followed, I went to Madame's tent more often than I'd like to admit. Not because it was safe, but because it was normal. No splashing from the mermaid tank, no stalking gazes from workers who'd been there too long, no sharp smile from the ringmaster. Just the crackle of candles and the soft scent of tea. Madame didn't ask what I'd seen, didn't scold me for being curious. She just listened, and sometimes she offered bits of advice that lodged in my chest and refused to move. One night, right as I stepped in, she spoke immediately. "You're changing." I froze. Madame tilted her head, her hair in the crystal shifting with emotion. "The circus is trying to keep you longer. You feel it, don't you?" I wanted to deny it, but my throat locked up, because it was true. The longer I stayed, the harder it was to leave. Hot meals, steady pay, people knowing my name. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just some passerby. "I just want to stay a little longer," I said quietly. "I need the money. I need time to think." Madame sighed, a little sadly. "Everyone who comes here says that. They all think they're the ones in control of when they leave." She looked deep into me. "But this place isn't a job. It's an invitation, a promise, a trap made of lights and kindness." Her eyes darkened. "And those who stay too long always pay." I forced a laugh. "You talk like I'm about to die." Madame didn't laugh, not even a little. "Not death, Ollie," she whispered. "Worse. Here, people don't just lose their lives. They lose themselves, their names, their memories, the things that make them human." I felt goosebumps race down my skin. She went on. "The ringmaster doesn't need to kill anyone. They trade themselves away for what they think they're missing." She looked at me as if she could see every wound inside. "And you're missing a lot." I wanted to argue, to storm out, but my legs wouldn't move. There was too much truth in her words. I remembered the years drifting from fair to fair, the cold train cars, the feeling that no one even knew I existed. Here, at least. I heard someone say my name every night. Madame spoke softly. "You came because you needed a job, but you stayed because you needed to belong." Her voice lowered. as if she was afraid of hurting me. That's the sweetest bait this circus has. That night, Madame didn't greet me with her usual smile. When I walked in, all the candles tilted at once in a cold gust that hadn't come from the door. The crystal ball went cloudy, like fog was rising from within. After a few seconds, her face reappeared, but older, more strained. "Ollie," she said softly, "I looked at something for you, and I wish I hadn't." The air around me felt suddenly thick, hard to breathe. "I see. Ropes," she whispered. "So many ropes. Tent lines, electrical cords, guy wires, all wrapped around you, pulling you deeper into the center of the circus." I swallowed. "You thought you were just here temporarily, but those ropes..." She tilted her head, eyes widening. "They're tightening." The way she looked at me made me feel like a drowning man who didn't know he was about to run out of air. "You have to leave before the sky is bright enough," Madame warned. "One day, you'll wake up and no longer remember why you wanted to leave. By then, it's too late." I forced a weak laugh. I'm not that easy to hypnotize. Madame's eyes made my spine turn to ice. "It's not hypnosis. It's a pact. This place rewards obedience with money, warm beds, hot meals. Then it takes back more than you can imagine." She paused, her voice catching. "It wants the souls of the lost." I said nothing, because deep down, I knew she wasn't exaggerating. Lately, I hadn't been counting my pay. I didn't think about where to go next. I couldn't even remember why I'd wanted to return to a normal life. I was starting to feel fine staying here. I even liked being called Ollie. Madame watched me, her eyes heavy. "See, it's already begun." Then she pressed her forehead against the inside of the crystal. "Listen to me, Ollie. Before it changes your name..." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Do I still have time to leave?" She closed her eyes for a long moment, as if listening to a voice from far away. When she opened them again, her voice trembled. "Yes, but not much." All the candles in the tent blew out at once. Darkness swallowed everything. And in that absolute black, Madame whispered not into my ears, but straight into my thoughts. Rule 3. Never stay too long. The circus doesn't hold on to people. It eats slowly. After that meeting with Madame, I tried to keep my distance from the circus, but the more I tried, the deeper I sank. During the day, while everyone rested, I wandered past the old train cars. Some were locked tight, thick with dust and cobwebs, like no one had entered in years. An older rope worker caught me staring and snapped, "Don't ask. Don't open them. That's where the ones who almost left, but changed their minds ended up." His words froze my blood, because last night I'd almost changed my mind too. That evening, while the crew was raising new tents, I saw a familiar face. A young man around 30, a bit hunched, was dragging equipment crates. The strange thing was, I was sure I'd seen him the week before as an audience member. I remembered his coat, the way he laughed while taking pictures. I walked over. "Weren't you a guest?" I asked. He looked up, eyes hollow like someone who hadn't slept in years. "I've worked here a long time," he said. His voice held no emotion. That night, I couldn't sleep. I passed the main tent and saw a figure standing completely still in the middle of the grounds. It was that man. He stood with his back to me, shoulders faintly shaking as if breathing very softly. I almost called out, but then I heard the ringmaster's voice behind me. He once wanted to leave. Then he realized he belonged here more. I turned, he was too close. His cologne as cold as old metal. Everyone here has a role. Once they realize that, they become very obedient. I had to leave, that was the only thought I could hold on to. But the more I repeated it, the more distant it felt. Every time I received an envelope of cash, I felt genuine relief. Every time someone called me Ollie, my chest warmed in a way I hated admitting. The circus knew exactly what I lacked: attention, existence, the feeling of being seen, and it gave me exactly those things, as if it could read my mind. The night before we moved on to the next town, while I was coiling cables, Madam suddenly called out in a voice more urgent than I'd ever heard. "Ollie, get in here, now." I rushed into her tent. Her crystal ball blazed like a white flame, her face twisted in pain. "It's begun," she said. "You don't sleep like you used to. You don't remember what happens at dawn. That's the first sign." My heart clenched. She was right. I had completely forgotten a couple of recent mornings. Totally. Madam told me to sit. The light in the crystal wavered like an oil lamp on its last drops. "Ollie, did you think the circus only eats people through the mermaids?" she said. "No, it has many ways, more subtle ones." She peered at me closely, as if checking how much of me was still left. "You've started forgetting. That's the clearest sign of the pact. If you don't cut it soon, you'll merge with this place and never know the moment you disappeared." I jumped up, panicking. "I still remember everything. I still know who I am." Madam smiled sadly, a smile that made my stomach tighten. "Then tell me, what did you do yesterday morning?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I remembered the night before, the mermaid tank, the ringmaster's eyes. But yesterday morning was a blank. No images, no sound. Like someone had cut that piece of time out. I collapsed back into the chair, my hands shaking out of control. "People who stay too long," Madam went on, "don't leave because they no longer want to. They no longer remember why leaving mattered." I thought of the young man I'd seen, his lifeless voice, his empty eyes. "He used to be a guest," I whispered. Madam nodded. "Yes, and then he forgot he'd ever been a guest. He even forgot he once had a home." Her words hit me like a falling stone. I understood. Suddenly, I was walking the same path. That night, while I was cleaning cables near the acrobat tent, I saw a group of people standing motionless at the back of the circus. They wore old uniforms, the colors faded, threads frayed. They stared right at me, not moving. When I stepped closer, they all turned away at once and went back to work like broken machines. An acrobat whispered as she passed me. "They used to have names. Now they only have roles." She didn't dare look for long. Neither did I, because for a moment, I saw my own reflection in their eyes. That night, I went to Madam in utter desperation. "I have to leave," I said, my voice cracking. Madam watched me for a long time, then exhaled. "You can, but the ringmaster has noticed you. He likes lost souls who find a home in the dark. You're a rare type." She closed her eyes, gathering a bright glow inside the crystal. "Tomorrow, when the circus pulls up stakes, you must hide. Don't tell anyone. Don't say goodbye to anyone. She opened her eyes, voice turning cold. "And don't let him see you go." I left Madam's tent with my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The circus was still lit that night, but in a few hours we'd be breaking down and driving to the next town. I had to be gone before sunrise, Madam had said so, but as I walked past rows of tents, I felt everything watching me. Light strings shivering without wind, canvas bulging softly as if something beneath was breathing. The circus wasn't somewhere you lived. It was something that swallowed you slowly. As I was gathering cables, the ringmaster appeared behind me without a sound. "Ollie," he said, his voice soft but seeping into my spine. "You look uneasy tonight." I pressed my lips together, trying to sound casual. "It's nothing, just tired." He tilted his head as if listening to my heartbeat. "You know," he said, "people who want to leave usually don't sleep much." He placed a hand on my shoulder, lightly but with the weight of a nail. "If you're worried about anything, come talk to me." I held my breath until he finally walked away, his red coat gliding past the tents like a clean cut through fabric. Only when he vanished did the air loosen slightly. I went back to work, but my hands shook so badly I dropped the cable coil twice. I began to fear he could hear my thoughts. Here, everything seemed connected to the ringmaster. Lights, tents, wind, even my fear. I whispered to myself, "Just make it to morning." Just until morning, close to midnight, I went back to Madam's tent to finalize our escape plan, but the candles were out and the flap was ajar. I stepped inside, bracing for the worst, but the crystal ball was still there, its light faint like a dying patient. Madam's voice floated out, thin as mist. "I'm fine. It just took too much to look into your future." I knelt by the table. "Madam, which way do I go?" she answered. "Take the back way, past the vet's trailer, then follow the drainage ditch out into the open field. But remember, don't look back." I stood up to leave when Madam spoke one last time, her voice urgent. "Ollie, if you hear someone call your name while you're running, whether it's me, a friend, or yourself, not turn around." Her words sent a surge of cold up my spine. I nodded. As I stepped out of the tent, the wind kicked up, and the faraway light strings flickered like a panicked heartbeat. The circus began breaking down, hammers pounding stakes like metal heartbeats. I knew this was my one chance. If I failed, I'd be part of this place forever. I waited until the noise was at its worst. The banging, the shouting, the clatter of cables and crates. It was the only time everyone was too busy to notice someone slipping through the dark. I pulled my hood up, kept my head low, and slipped between the old train cars. Back here, the lights were dimmer, the voices fewer, but the deeper I went, the more I heard other sounds. Canvas rustling with no wind, ropes creaking tighter around stakes in ways that didn't sound natural at all. I passed the mermaid tank. It had been covered with a thick tarp, but I could still hear the soft, steady sounds of something moving in the water, like someone patiently waiting. A clear, smooth voice floated up from beneath the tarp. "Ollie." I froze. That wasn't a human voice. It was smooth and liquid, flowing like water. Madam had told me not to turn around, not to answer. I clenched my teeth and walked faster, but the voice came again, right next to my ear. "Don't go. Come down here with us." I ran. My heart slammed against my ribs like it wanted out. Once, I turned around on instinct and stopped cold. The tent behind me was pulsing, not from the wind, but from something moving inside, pushing the fabric out like a body taking deep breaths. I panted and understood Madame had been right. The circus was alive. It knew I was leaving. A few figures in the distance lifted their heads all at once, their throats making dry, rasping sounds like ropes scraping over wood. At the vet's trailers, I saw the exit Madame had mentioned, a narrow gap leading to the back where moonlight spilled into a ditch carrying wastewater out into an empty field. I'd barely stepped into it when a sharp snap sounded behind me like a rope yanked tight. The circus shifted, not dismantling, moving closer. The stakes shrieked in the ground, the guy lines straining like the sinews of a beast lunging for prey. I sprinted down the ditch, icy water soaking my feet. I'd only run a few dozen meters when the long shadow of the ringmaster fell across the ground in front of me. He didn't step out. He appeared, like someone had cut him out of the air and pasted him there. His red coat was spotless, his eyes reflecting the moonlight like silver mirrors. "Ollie," he said, full of regret. "I hoped you'd be smarter than this." He held out a hand, palm open, inviting, "Come back. Your family's waiting." Behind me, the tent started closing in like a pack of starving beasts. I stood frozen. Moonlight washed over his face, and his skin looked utterly smooth, without pores or wrinkles, like a mask made from something that wasn't human flesh. "Why me?" I blurted. The ringmaster tilted his head, his eyes brightening like two mirrors full of my panic. "Because you're empty," he said gently. "People like you, no roots. Nothing holding you down are gems to me. I just have to polish a little, and then they stay forever." I stepped back and slipped into the filthy water at the bottom of the ditch. The ringmaster advanced without walking. He glided, as if moved by thought alone. "Do you know what's most wonderful about you, Ollie?" he whispered. "You want to belong. You want a family. I give you that. I give you a name, a job, a bed, meals. I give you what the real world never did." The wind rose, puffing his coat out like invisible black wings. "I don't want to stay anymore," I said, my voice trembling. The ringmaster stopped. His smile stretched a little too far to be called human. "Who said you wanted to leave?" he asked. "You think that thought was yours?" He placed two fingers lightly against my temple, as gentle as touching glass. A freezing rush sliced into my brain. Images flashed: laughter, warm meals, envelopes of cash, and that warmth in my chest every time someone called me Ollie. I realized some of those memories weren't mine. The circus had planted them. I jerked away, gasping like my lungs had been emptied. "Give them back," I shouted. The ringmaster chuckled softly. "Give what back? Yours?" "Ollie, memories are just clay. Here, I simply reshape the broken pieces into a better version of you." He spread his arms. Behind him, the black and gold tents pulsed in unison like a single beating heart. "Everyone has a place here. Where will you run? In a world that's already forgotten you." I shook my head, tears spilling without my knowing if they were from fear or pain. The ringmaster looked at me the way someone might look at a runaway child. "Ollie, just one step forward, and I'll forgive your little panic." He held out his hand, pale, cold, utterly still. But behind him, in the gaps between the tents, I saw dozens of figures standing motionless, gaunt, their eyes empty. The ones who had stayed too long. No names, no will of their own. They were the final warning. I whipped around and ran with everything I had. I tore through the black, stagnant water, feet cutting on sharp stones, cold mud, rotting leaves. Behind me, I heard the ringmaster call, "Ollie." Just one word, but it slid down my spine like a cold knife. It wasn't a normal call, it echoed inside my skull, dragging my pace slower with each step. I shook my head hard, biting my tongue to stay sharp. I couldn't trust any sound now. I couldn't even trust my own memories. I tore through the half-dismantled circus. Hanging ropes snapped tight, smacking together like a nest of snakes sensing prey. One suddenly whipped around my ankle, coiling tight like a small hand grabbing me. I crashed to the ground. Sand and dirt exploded in my face. When I tried to pull the rope off, it only tightened alive with its own strength. Panic surged. I grabbed the small knife I always kept in my pocket and slashed hard. The rope snapped away, writhing like a wounded animal. I scrambled up and ran, heart hammering like it would burst. The tents on either side began to move literally. Canvas swelled and shrank like flesh around lungs. One tent leaned sideways, blocking my path like it was trying to stop me. Faceless silhouettes pressed against the thin fabric from inside, their hands flattening against it like they wanted to crush me between two walls. I darted right and barely avoided a sheet of canvas that slammed down like a guillotine. Ahead of me stood a line of people, the nameless ones, each spaced a few steps apart, forming a living wall. Their eyes were cloudy, mouths slightly open but silent. "Please move," I shouted. No one budged. When I tried to push through, they all reached toward me at once, not fast, not violent, just brushing my clothes with fingers cold as tombstones. But every light touch blurred my mind, memories leaking out of me like water from a torn bag. I screamed in desperation, shoved hard, and squeezed through a gap between two of them. I sprinted toward the end of the ditch, where moonlight spilled onto the open ground beyond the circus. Only a few more meters, when a voice froze me in place. "Ollie, come back. I forgive you." But it wasn't the ringmaster. It was another voice, my own, from ahead, from the darkness outside the circus. My knees almost buckled. Madam had warned me. If I ever heard my own voice, I must not turn around. I shut my eyes, gritted my teeth, and kept running even as my whole body crawled with the feeling of being clawed from the inside. I burst past the last row of tents, my legs about to give out. Moonlight flooded the open field in front of me, freedom just within reach. But as I stepped over the line where firm ground met the drainage ditch, a figure stepped out from the opposite side. He had my build, my height, even the same clumsy gait. Under the moonlight, his face came into focus. Me, but with eyes as empty as dead water. "Don't go," that version of me said. In my exact voice, every vibration identical. I stumbled back, breath hitching. "You're not me," I rasped. The other me took a step forward, his feet making no sound on the ground. "I'm what you'll become," he said softly. "If you come back, you won't hurt anymore. You won't be scared. You won't be empty." He spread his arms like he wanted to embrace me, but his hands were too long, the joints stretching endlessly like a doll whose limbs had been pulled out of shape. Stay, he whispered. With the family. I turned to bolt left, but the earth beneath my feet suddenly turned soft and sucking. Not mud canvas. The tent fabric had spread out like a living hide, rolling into a sticky membrane that grabbed at my legs. Stakes driven deep into the ground rattled, ringing like bells. The circus knew I was about to escape. It started dragging me back. The canvas rose up like a giant hand, reaching to wrap around my ankles. I yanked out my knife and slashed at the tightening fabric. The blade cut through, but instead of the rip of cloth, I heard a low moan, wet, pained, like I'd cut into real flesh. My face went cold. I jerked my leg free and dashed right, searching for an opening between the tall grass by the circus edge. Behind me, the other Ollie followed, not fast, not slow, yet each of his steps erased sound around him, as if he was devouring the night itself. I understood. If he touched me, I'd become him. I saw the final way out. A shallow irrigation ditch crossing the field, leading toward a dirt road a few 100 meters away. I threw everything I had into one jump, landing in the ditch and sliding through the wet muck. Before I could stand up, the ringmaster appeared at the edge like a tree sprouting in an instant. "Ollie," he said, voice smooth as a lullaby that kills. "Stop hurting yourself. This place needs you, and you need it." He leaned closer, his eyes sharp as blades. "Come back, or I'll bring you back myself." I pressed my back against the ditch wall, the damp mud soaking into my clothes. The ringmaster climbed halfway down, just enough for me to smell that familiar metallic cologne. "What do you think you're running from, Ollie?" he asked. Voice soft, but hard as steel. "The outside world? The place where no one remembers you were ever there?" He held his hand out to me. In that moment, all my memories, cold train cars, rushed meals, nights sleeping outdoors, crashed over me, tangled with the fake memories the circus had planted. I no longer knew which were real. "You belong here," he continued, his eyes so bright they reflected my distorted figure. "People like you, lost, lonely, invisible, only need a roof. I gave you that. Why throw it away?" I tried to stand, but my legs trembled. "Because it's not home," I said, my voice cracking. "Because here, I'll disappear." He laughed, the sound like a coin striking metal. "Disappear? No, Ollie. Here, you become part of the family forever." Suddenly, a cold wind swept along my back, carrying a familiar whisper. "Ollie, run." Madam's voice. I turned but didn't see her, only her crystal ball rolling along the ditch edge, glowing bright green-blue. The ringmaster's jaw clenched. "Useless old hag," he growled. The crystal stopped at my feet. Inside, Madam's face appeared, gaunt but resolute. "Don't listen to him. Now, Ollie, run." The light in the crystal flared like a white firework, forcing the ringmaster to recoil on instinct. He shielded his eyes, but only for a moment. When he opened them again, blackness churned in his pupils like smoke. "I've never lost a single person I decided to keep," he said, voice so deep the ground vibrated. He grabbed my collar, yanking me up hard enough to spray mud everywhere. I struggled, but he was impossibly strong, not humanly strong. He pulled my face close to his, speaking through clenched teeth. "You're not going anywhere." I could barely breathe. my vision dimming. In that moment of pure desperation, Madame screamed from inside the crystal. "Oli, remember the last rule. It's not to fight, it's to run." I gathered every scrap of strength I had left, not to push against him, but to go limp. The ringmaster, caught off guard, lost his balance for a split second. I slipped down along the ditch wall, twisting past his side and out of his grip. He roared, the sound like metal being ground to dust. I sprang up and bolted toward the moonlight. For the first time, it felt like I might actually escape. I scrambled up out of the ditch, my legs bleeding from sharp rocks, but I didn't dare stop. The field stretched in front of me like a silver lake under the moon, freedom, only a few 100 meters away. Behind me, I heard the circus moving, not the sound of packing up, the sound of something huge crawling after me. The ground trembled with its weight. When I risked a glance back, the black and gold tents were rearing up, stacking into grotesque shapes like massive mouths yawning open. Amid those warped structures, the ringmaster strode forward, his red coat flickering like a living flame. He didn't run, but each step made the ground crack softly. "Oli!" he roared, his voice booming like 100 speakers at once. "You can't run from your family." Instantly, dozens of figures spilled out from the tents, the nameless ones charging toward me like a horde of the dead. Their feet made no sound. Only their heavy breathing whistled like wind through metal pipes. I gritted my teeth and veered right, trying to skirt the swarm of hollow people. One grabbed my jacket. I yanked so hard the fabric tore. Another blocked my way, eyes empty but lips curling into a thin thread of a smile. "Stay," he whispered. His voice had many layers, like several people speaking through a single mouth. I drove my elbow into his chest, shoving him aside, and sprinted toward the distant line of trees. My body was spent, but fear had turned me into something feral. The ground suddenly surged beneath my feet. The circus canvas had stretched out toward me again, like a wet tongue slick with mud. It swept under me, wrapping around my legs. I crashed down, and the canvas instantly tightened, dragging me back toward the circus like a constrictor snake. Behind me, the ringmaster spread his arms. "Yes, come back. You don't have to fight anymore, Ollie." I clawed at the dirt, grabbing rocks, roots, anything. But the pull was so strong that whole chunks of earth slid along with the canvas. Right as the canvas was about to close over my chest, a thunderous blast exploded, bright as lightning. Madame Rosmerta's crystal ball rolled down from the ditch rim and shattered into thousands of blazing shards. A swirling white wind burst out from the explosion's center, slamming into the canvas and flinging it back toward the circus. The ringmaster stumbled away, covering his face, screaming in rage. In that light, I heard Madame's voice, weak, shaking, but still clear. "This is the last time I can help you. Oli, run now." Without hesitation, I scrambled up and threw myself into the darkness. I ran like every breath was my last. The light from Madame's crystal left a white streak behind me, but it faded quickly, letting the night swallow the field. I looked back once the circus was collapsing into itself, but not like before. It was stretching out, like an endless shadow clinging to my back. Stakes tore free of the earth, dragging trails of mud behind them like insect legs. I realized it wasn't just chasing me. It was trying to drag my very essence back. I slid down a small rise and nearly fell when the ground in front of me suddenly broke. Not a natural hole and opening, splitting wide like a grinning mouth. The space beyond warped like a funhouse mirror. I understood then. The ringmaster wasn't just chasing me physically. He was twisting reality itself, curling the field into a maze with no exit. Far away, his voice rolled across the ground, through the wind, beating in time with my pulse. "You have nowhere to go, Ollie." I turned left rocks, right boggy ground deep enough to swallow me whole. Ahead, a black crack with no visible bottom. Behind, the shambling steps of the nameless ones coming closer. Nausea and panic rose together. I was close to sobbing when everything felt ready to collapse. I heard Madam's voice, faint, far away, like an echo from a place that no longer existed. "Don't run away from the exit. Run through what you fear." I looked again at the black fissure, that gaping mouth. Too deep, too dangerous, too insane. But it was the only path the circus hadn't blocked. Behind me, the ringmaster appeared one more time, not stepping out, but rising from the earth like a cutout lifted from nothingness. "I'm still patient, Ollie," he said, silk smooth and horrifying. "I'll heal you. I'll make your life easy. Just step back here." I turned to look at him and stared into his mirror-like eyes. For the first time, I didn't see magic inside them. I saw countless faces, people who'd stayed too long. No names, no souls, no hope. I realized if he touched me one more time, I'd become one of them, without time to think, without time to pray. I hurled myself into the crack. My whole body dropped into freezing darkness like solid ice. I heard the ringmaster scream. No more calm, no more polite, just the roar of a beast robbed of its prey. "Oli, you belong to me." The sound vibrated through my bones, pulling downward like a second gravity. I felt an invisible hand yanking at my collar from behind, but I lunged forward, groping through the dark until my fingers brushed real earth. A thin silver light pierced the black. I crawled toward it, pouring everything I had left into each movement. Then I burst out of the crack, tumbling onto dry ground. About 100 meters from where the circus had been, behind me, the circus was gone. I lay motionless on the barren ground, each breath tearing out of my lungs like fire. My body ached everywhere, caked in mud and dirt like the residue of a nightmare. When my breathing finally steadied, I looked back and saw nothing. No tents, no lights, no ropes, no ringmaster. The circus had vanished completely, as if it had never existed. Only an empty, cold patch of earth remained. Under a still, windless sky, I started crying not from pain, but because I finally understood I was still alive. I dragged myself to my feet, desperate to leave that field before anything changed. After a few dozen meters, I felt something hard beneath my boot. I bent down. It was a curved shard of glass, as big as my palm. A piece of Madame Rosmerta's crystal ball. I picked it up. A faint glow still clung to its surface, like the lingering warmth of a soul not fully gone. In the wind, I heard a faint whisper. "Go, Ollie. Do what you were always too afraid to do." I knew Madame had shattered herself to buy me this last chance. I started walking down the dirt track, toward the nearest town. Each step felt heavy, like invisible hands were tugging from behind. I was afraid that even though I'd escaped, pieces of the circus's planted memories were still lodged inside me. Every time someone said Ollie, every time I saw yellow lights, I shivered. I found a small freight yard and slipped into an old cargo car waiting to be hitched. I sat among cold wooden crates, shivering and fighting to hold on to myself. Right before the train rolled out, I opened my torn backpack and a thin wisp of smoke seeped from Madam's glass shard like a final goodbye. I drifted from place to place for weeks, changing trains constantly, avoiding crowds. I wrote everything that had happened in a beat-up notebook, every detail, every breath, every step. I was terrified that if I didn't, the circus would eat my memories even from a distance. One cold morning, I opened my backpack to grab some bread and found a purple envelope nestled among my things. No stamp, no postmark. No one knew where I was. I opened it. Inside were just a few lines, written in soft, familiar handwriting. I have paid my debt in full. Now it's your turn to live your own life. Rosmerda. I clenched the letter, eyes burning. She was gone, but her words remained. I stood at a fork in the road. One path led toward a big city where I could find schools, jobs, and try to rebuild the life I'd wasted. The other led to a lonely road cutting through the desert, and I knew that somewhere out there, Madam had opened a small shop for lost souls. I took a deep breath, then walked toward the sunlight, not toward the circus, not toward the dark, but toward a future that was real, a future I chose myself, not one someone else led me into. Before leaving for good, I turned to look at the empty ground one last time. Night fell faster than it should. The wind rose, and in that brief moment, I saw a flicker of red, like the edge of the ringmaster's coat. Then it was gone. I swallowed hard, turned away, and walked faster, because I knew the circus never chases you. It just waits until the day you're weak enough to come back. Thank you for listening to Darkwatch Stories. If this story gave you chills, make sure to like, subscribe, and share so we can keep bringing you more. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware of what might be watching in the dark.